Quick and easy beat for your Dana 44. Stay tuned. Now this here is a 2021 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. And as most of you know, that means, well, underneath is equipped with the legendary Dana 44 axles. Now right out of the box, these axles are a very capable combination. However, they can use a little upgrading. So today, we're going to get rid of those wimpy stamped steel diff covers and replace them with a set of heavy-duty nodular-iron diff covers from Yukon Gear. Now your first question might be, why would you want to upgrade your diff covers? The short answer's vulnerability and strength. Your axle center sections are the lowest hanging component on your 4x4. And as such, they're often the first thing that makes contact with trail obstacles, well, when you're out on the trail. These heavy-duty diff covers from Yukon Gear, they feature a nodular iron construction, and that's going to give you high strength. They have contoured inner surfaces, which is going to give you better cooling. And then there's the magnetic drain plugs, and that's going to catch any metallic particles that might be floating around inside your diff. Then they're black powder coated, which is going to give you durability and good looks. Now inside the box, you're going to find a heavy-duty Yukon diff cover, a bag with the hardware, and then of course a decal. Tools needed for this job are a ratchet, an extension, a 6mm hex, and a 3/8 hex, then a 10mm socket and a 15mm socket. It's also handy to have some rags, some gloves for your hand, and some safety goggles. Now the first thing we need to do is get the Jeep up in the air. And you don't have to have a lift to do these covers. You can use jack stands. If you had a tall set of jack stands that you can put underneath the frame to lift the frame up, we want to be able to get the axle to drop down to where we can get the bolts to get at our diff cover. Now on this Gladiator, the sway bar goes right across the diff cover, and so we do have to remove that, and that's where we're going to start with these two bolts on each side, and they're 15mm. Alright, we're going to grab our sway bar and pull it out of the way, and then grab our socket and our ratchet and start pulling bolts. Now ratchet's fine, but sometimes it's just nicer to go a little faster. Now we want to save our top bolts for last. And then we can let her drain. And now we can pull our last bolt. We want to be careful because sometimes the factory gasket pops right off. And we want to clean up our sealing surface. So then we want to examine our gasket, get it cleaned up, check for any damages on it. Of course, this one's fairly new. It's in really good shape, so we're just going to reuse it. And so for our hardware, we're going to throw a little bit of blue Loctite on them. And that's just going to give them that little extra edge to keep them in place. Grab our diff cover and our gasket. And we're just going to start the first bolt just a couple threads, and then the same for the next one. Make sure you got the gasket lined up properly. With all the bolts started, you want to lift and hold the cover up against the mating surface, and then we're just going to hand tighten a couple of the bolts. And just use an alternating pattern to just continue tightening the bolts. With the diff cover installed, the sway bar goes back in place. Then it's time to refill the rear diff with some Redline high performance gear oil. For the Rubicon M220 Dana 44 rear axle with the E-Locker, it's going to take 3.06 pints. The non-E-Locker M220s get 3.02 pints. Finish off by installing the fill plug. And you want to make sure you use some Teflon tape or Teflon paste on the threads, and that'll help keep it sealed. Now the clearance is tight with the sway bar in place, so it's easiest to use a ball end hex bit. One thing about aftermarket diff covers is that they're extra beefy, which means extra thick, and that can create clearance issues with other components. For the rear, we're left with about a 1/2 inch clearance between the factory sway bar and the new Yukon diff cover, which really is plenty. Now if we add a larger sway bar down the road, we may need to add spacer plates under the sway bar mounts to help space it away from the cover. The front diff cover is a little easier to get to, as we only have the tie rod assembly, and that stands out enough to allow us to get in there and change the covers. Now just like the rear, you're going to remove the bolts, leaving the top bolts for last. Then drain the oil and remove the cover. The new cover then goes on with the Yukon supplied hardware. And just like the rear, torque to 30 foot-pounds. Now we also filled the front with Redline high performance diff oil. For the Rubicon M210 front, it's going to take 2.18 pints. The front fill plug also gets a little Teflon sealant before it's spun in and torqued down. Now just like the rear, we need to double check our clearances at the front, and the tie rod assembly is what's going to be closest. Now with our tires facing forward, we've got about 3 fingers worth of clearance between the new heavy duty diff cover and the factory tie rod assembly. Now if we steer all the way to the right hand side, we now have just a loose 2-finger fit, and that's because the factory tie rod has this bend in it. Now if we go all the way to the driver's side, now we're back to where the tie rod is straight. It's tight. We have just under a finger of clearance. And there's plenty of clearance for right now, but that's with the factory tie rod assembly. So be careful. If you're going to be upgrading to an aftermarket tie rod assembly, you'll want to check the diameter and make sure that you're going to clear. And this is going to be the same with any aftermarket heavy duty diff cover. You're going to get the heavy duty part because the new covers are thicker. That's what gives you all that strength. But you got to make sure everything's going to clear. So there you just saw how easy it is to install a set of heavy duty differential covers from Yukon Gear. And we did it in the Jeep Gladiator, but these also fit the Wrangler JL, and the rear cover even fits the Ford Bronco. So if you've got a Dana 44, well, Yukon Gear can help you beef it up. Now we've got them here at Northridge 4x4. Hit those links in the description box below and get a set on its way to you. And then while you're down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching today. We'll see you again soon.